If the line were to break, isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. What happens then is a massive influx of a substance that wasn't never meant to be on Mother Earth. It was to stay in Mother Earth. But now that it's financially agreeable with some people, now they're pumping it out of the earth in wholesale, and they're trying to find a way to deal with it, and they're putting lives at risk to do so. And for financial gain, I can't back nothing like that.
So Line 9 is a pipeline that was put there 40 years ago. And why it's critical for us today is because while 99B has been there for 40 years, what's being asked now, or actually what is happening right now, is that what's being put through Line 9B is a heavier thick crude oil, and the flow is being reversed. And also how much is going through Line 9B is significant. So we're a little bit concerned about that, actually more than a little bit concerned, because a 40-year-old pipeline trying to carry a different type of oil and crude oil in a different way at a greater capacity, we think it's just a recipe for disaster for our waterways.
I think, look at this situation, we've taken on a legal challenge. Chippewas of the Thames First Nation has decided to go the length of that legal challenge, knowing full well that the decision that's made in the Supreme Court of Canada might not be on our side, but that won't stop us from doing what our responsibility is, and that's keeping our Mother Earth safe. So I think how I see it is Chippewa has decided to exhaust the legal system. And we could take another route. We can actually do what's going on in places like North Dakota today and fight against this in a confrontational manner. And it might even come down to that at some point. But at this point, we decided to take on this legal role because what this legal challenge is going to do, it's going to make Canada adhere to the protocols that where disruption or desecration within traditional territories need to be looked after. So we need to go to court. We could actually do an agreement with the government of Canada today, and maybe they can offer something that would satisfy our need. But without a Supreme Court decision, we'll be in the same boat as we were before. So Chippewa has decided to take on the responsibility of legal fees and to take on this role, to take it to the highest level of Canada, to make a decision that Canada will have to follow and all other parts of Canada will have to look at. So it's, to me, exciting, but it's we do have some liability. We do definitely need to make this a very serious issue because all of Canada is affected by this historic decision.
To summarize what's going on legally would be like David and Goliath. We're putting a fight up against corporate Canada The NEB is a very complex creature, but they're just the same coming as any of the other people that want to dig up and, in my opinion, rape Mother Earth. It's just how they go about it. The people that represent them were fighting against what would amount to a Goliath. We're just a few native people living on this land, and that's what they would like us to be perceived as. But the reality of the situation is that we're all here. This isn't a native thing. This isn't an environmentalist thing. This is a human thing. And in order for that to be brought to the proper light, these fights have to be brought up and brought to the front and foremost of people's minds.
It's terrible, because it's really the only reason is to make profit for those shareholders of Enbridge, not to help the people. So they're profit motivated. And I've yet to hear somebody explain how it's going to benefit people of Canada.
In the world that they live in, it's cost effective to reuse and rethink and re-engineer things for financial gain. Not because they studied all of this and they're going to find out exactly what happens when you reverse the flow of a line. They're doing it out of necessity of money, monetary gain again.
We're seeing how capitalism has looked at these precious resources as commodities. We can't look at our natural resources as commodities. They're life-enduring elements that Creator gave us. And us as the original people of this land, we're told that we have to protect it, just like we would protect our mother, as we should. And I think this is necessary for us to stand up to fight for the water, because it's not just Chippewa. It's nations all across the world. Indigenous nations' role is to look after the land. If you look at what's going on throughout the world, Indigenous peoples are starting to stand up to protect the earth.
There's an old line that says, money is the root of all evil. This is the epitome of that. You can't possibly know the outcome of reversing the flow of anything until there's 60,000 gallons of black crude flowing through your river. There's no way of knowing or gauging the explosion off of something like that, because a line wasn't designed to flow that way in the first place. And the fact that they're pushing this through and running this through our land and saying, oh, don't pay any attention to this, this is all taken care of. Well, I'm sorry, but it isn't all taken care of, and they don't know what they're dealing with. And until we're sitting here unable to drink the water, unable to breathe the air, only then will they learn that maybe it wasn't something we should have done for the love of money.
We think Line 9B has already been affecting the environment. We feel that different research we're seeing that these pipelines were made at a time when maybe the technology wasn't so great as it is now, and yet it's being asked to do more based on those old technologies. And then we're confident, I believe, that these pipelines have been leaking and continue to leak. Maybe not at the level that you get in the news, but I'm sure there's leakage happening and erosion happening on these pipelines all the way through the territorial, all the way down to Quebec. So we think that this pipeline needs to probably be decommissioned, and we need to work through some sort of arrangement on how it is that this company, Enbridge, works to think about that I think if I were to consider our nation's approach to this, we've tried, I think, really hard to develop a relationship that would have our voice be equal at the table, but unfortunately that hasn't been the case. So Line 9B has the potential to become a disaster because of the old outdated technology and the decisions that are being made, unfortunately, without us. When we lose animals and wildlife in our traditional territories, it's probably going to be a sign that our lives are at stake here too. Our teachings tell us that, we're just one of many in this long, huge family called creation. And if any of our brothers or sisters are four-leggeds, are winged ones, are crawlers, if they're in distress, then pretty much guarantee that we, the two-leggeds, are in distress too, whether we want to see it or not. And I think it's our obligation to make sure that if we're going to be part of this big family, as we've been taught, then we need to take care of our wildlife and work really hard to change our ways so that we can live here in I guess in harmony with them, and that they can have a life here as well, and not lose their lives because of our unfortunate ways of how we maybe take them for granted in the society. So it's going to impact us in a big way. We've got families that are still hunting and gathering, and we've got families that rely on that for food. And I think that part of what Chippewas stands for is those treaty rights and those Aboriginal rights that guarantee for us a level of sustenance from our lands. And if we're not able to maintain that level of sustenance, that level of wildlife in our communities, then we're not doing our jobs. We're not conducting our ways in a sustainable way. So we know we're not alone in this, and any changes we make are going to be minor if we don't work in partnership with everyone along the Thames Valley watershed. Even that is a small undertaking given the state of all the fresh water sources here in Canada. But it's our territory, and that's where we're going to start.
Well, Line 9 is a bad thing because when they put it in, of course, they didn't tell us, didn't consult with us, and of course, that was before 1982. 1982 is when we received our inherent rights and treaty rights in Section 35 when they repatriated the Constitution. So we have that inherent right now, and so they have the duty to consult with us as a government, and the duty to consult as well as accommodate and now consent. So those were actually what came out of some of the court cases that we did in the last 5 or 6 years.
Of course, they never consulted on us, and so they owe us for all of those right-of-ways over our total treaty area. I mean, not just them. You've got hydro, you've got hundreds of other right-of-ways that go through our treaty area. In the early 70s, I also learned what Indian rights were, what the true Indian rights are, what our positions were. Indian rights are really rights of a nation. We are nations. We're not tribes. We operated here for 10,000 years, but I still had this idea that somehow I'm going to get us in the Constitution. And from there, I begun the job, I guess, little by little, of putting together what it is we needed that would be so strong that no legal argument raised by any lawyer, any place in the world could overturn this. So the way you see Section 35 written is why it was written that way. It's written so that they can't go against it. So I got it in, and I got a lot of opposition to it because government always had the position, well, a parliamentary law will overturn your rights. That is not the case. And I used to have a leader there, Christian. He said, "Oh, maybe we don't have a trust responsibility for you. It's only trust-like." But once I got Section 35 in, the trust then became even stronger. It became a fiduciary responsibility. And the difference is the trust lasts 21 years, fiduciary lasts forever. So, and they're still trying to grab our rights and resources in all sorts of different legal fashions. And well, we got it in. And the only reason I got it in was because I opened an office in England. And I started lobbying the world, and telling them what Canada was really doing to First Nations people, telling them all the conditions. And this got back to the government. Finally, one day I had Christian come to me. He says, "Mr. Riley," he says, "if you will close your office in England, we'll give you your protection for Aboriginal treaty rights." Put him there. He shook my hand, and that's how it got in. Case closed.
I think that it really compels us to not sit back and assume a company or a corporation is going to do right by the lands and clean it up and remedy it back to its natural state, given what's going through those pipelines. I think that if we're going to make a difference in changing the way we think about how we interact with the water, those pipelines carrying that type of crude probably shouldn't be part of the story. We've got to work harder to get ourselves off fossil fuels. I know it's going to be a long road, but the reality is we don't have much more time, I don't think.
If we look back at Kalamazoo, Michigan, or where we've seen a spill in 2010, that was 6 years ago. The ecosystem has been devastated. The rivers, the lakes, the land, everything that it touched is still not fixable. So what we're seeing here and what we're trying to prevent is a devastation of the land and resources that's in this region. So yes, it's a dangerous line, and people aren't even understanding how dangerous it is. So as our responsibility as members of our nation and protectors of the land, we're going to do everything we can to protect our Mother the Earth and all the resources that she gave us.
I mean, if we continue to take for granted drinking water that's not free, readily accessible by all, we're going to find ourselves in a very, very sorry state, and that reality is around the corner, I believe. So having a spill, an oil pipeline spill in our territory would be devastating to our waterways, and there's no way that we could ever think to restore that in a short period of time without a considerable amount of effort and actually giving up of some of the things that we take for granted that are always going to be there. Lots of resources would have to go into that in ways that would mean that we'd have to not be able to pour resources in other things. So let's not wait for that. Let's not. Why are we continuing to go down this road and expecting that by doing nothing things are going to change? I think there's just too much at stake now. There's just way too much, and we're going to have to do things differently in regards to how we think about fossil fuels and how we think our future is with energy here in Canada.
Well, it's bad because they reversed the way the oil flows, and they added dirty oil. So you need high pressure. So if you have high pressure in an old archaic pipeline, you know, and it actually deteriorates from the inside as well as from the outside. So, and they've had plenty of leaks that are not known. I know of one leak, though, that was up north of London, which if you go on that farm now, you can't use any of the land, eh? So they paid them off and it didn't hit the media. So we can't chance it getting into one of our creeks that tributes the Thames River, which tributes into the St. Clair Lake, and then down, of course, to the Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and out to St. Lawrence. So if we had a major leak like they just had in Saskatchewan, 40 million people who drink the water out of these lakes would have no water. They would have to resort back to, and it would eventually get into the aquifers. So because these streams recharge the aquifers, so we because our water is so sacred, it was our duty as one of the Three Fires Confederacy to protect it. And we have all the legal means to do that now.
Well, Line 9 has devastating effects. The reason that Chippewa is affected is that pipeline itself, when it first was put into the ground, had a life expectancy of 40 years. It's now 40 years later, and the pipeline has seen its lifespan. So that means that the pipe itself is eroding. It's starting to deteriorate. And just recently, when the National Energy Board gave the application an approval to run tar sands oil through it at a larger capacity, then there's a element of danger that exists. And it runs right under Chippewas of the Thames' most precious asset. It's the Thames River. And the Thames River still feeds many families at Chippewa, and some of the plants and medicines that grow around the Thames River are in vast danger by this pipeline running through our territory. I practice ceremonies, and my sweat lodges and other things that I do are having my feet right on the ground. If I don't, then I can't even balance my own self, because a way of healing is to walk on our Mother the Earth. A way of healing is to put your feet into the waters that exist. A way of healing is to know those medicines and to feel the comfort that they bring. So for me, without having those in my life, means that my lifespan will be a lot shorter, that my knowledge base that I can pass on to my future generations will be basically wiped out. So for me, touching the land and having people do their fasting ceremonies on the land is probably the most healing feeling that you can have, because Creator gives you all that you need. Creator gives you the medicine that you need to survive, and we have to treat her that way. You know, we have to give our Mother the Earth all that she does for us. And I think that's really where we need to go as a healing generation.
Well, line 9, if there's a major leak and it gets into the river, Chippewa will have no water, because we take our water from our own aquifer, which is under the Thames River, and they're recharged by our own water wetlands, which are the swamps within our community. So if there's a leak, and in the floodplain, and that's where our pumps are, oil would mix with our water, and of course we would have no water at all, and as well as many other cities along the Thames. And if it leaked in the lakes, then it is a major disaster.
We're seeing that even, I just got back from New Orleans, where the spill in the Gulf is still devastated land. They don't even know the effects of how many fish and how many plant lives have been affected by oil spills. They do know the effects of what takes place when oil spills happen, and in this case, the land itself is in danger because of the tar sands. Previous to bringing tar sands to this region, it was a light crude oil, which didn't have the same effect as the tar sands that they're going to be running now. Because of the diluent that it takes to move oil is going to create a more devastating effect to the land. So even when this line spills, there's no way it's going to be able to be cleaned up. The land that it touches, it's going to be devastated. One of our most crucial components of life is water. And when the water gets disrupted, similar to what will happen when this line breaks, our life will be changed forever. The oil that flows down the river will affect the pickerel that we still fish for in the springtime. The deer that we still hunt will be affected. The food that we use will be affected. So the devastating effect to collecting medicine will be detrimental, for our nation. So Chippewa is in a very dangerous situation with this pipeline running through our territory.
There's no new water. We use the same water over and over again. The way the Great Lakes are, it's all recycled. It's in the form of ice, it's in the form of water, it's in the form of condensation. And once it gets into the clouds, then it comes down. Whatever's in it is going to come down in condensation and in rain. And it's just like back in the 80s, they had acid rain, which was caused by major smokestacks of factories, but now they've got laws against those, so there's less acid rain. But now this is going to affect the water. So once the water is affected, and what it would do, we would probably have to move, because there's, without water, you can't live.
Chippewa never left the land or the water. You're only cut off by it by modern day poisoning of the land and the water. The only reason we're separated from it now is because we don't really know what's in it anymore, and they're not willing to tell us. Not until our kids are sitting around with rashes, or suddenly there's cancers being found in children that have never smoked or never did any cancer-causing activities. I don't think anybody's born with cancer, but now they are. And they're not willing to look into doing any sort of studies on that. All they are willing to do is just put lives at risk again for the monetary gain of it all.
Line 9 travels through the city of Toronto. It travels through many Aboriginal communities and many rivers and lakes and tributaries in Ontario. The dangers that exist with Line 9 are the high chance of breakage of that line. Experts have said within 2 to 5 years there's going to be a massive oil break in Line 9, someplace on this line. We know that the challenge that we have with this line will be the devastation that exists when it does erupt. The history of Enbridge is not been acceptable. There's been lines or parts of this line that has already spilled that hasn't been told to Canadians. They've had a number of, 35 in particular spills over the last 20 years or so that this line has been in existence, and now it's going to break again, and all the evidence proves that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
So if there ever is a spill from Line 9B, I think the impacts are going to be incredible on our wildlife. I think the type of crude that's going through there is just going to sink, and we're not going to be able to get it out, which means it's going to be a permanent scar on the land, and that scar is going to bleed for a long time, causing devastation in our natural habitats. That's how do you undo that? And how do we even begin to think to leave that for our great-grandchildren to worry about? I guess that's the most frustrating thing in all of this, is that we're not planning adequately for a time when we're not here. for our time, for our young people, our great-great-grandchildren, what will we leave them? And if that line 9B spills, it won't be much. There won't be wildlife there. There won't be an ecosystem there. All of everything that we are is water. Everything that we do and everything that we as the human race can even possibly imagine and think about centers on water. We are that river. And so for us to sit here and think that one spill is just one not to worry about, I think there's just too much evidence out there in all of the lakes and rivers all over North America that our earth is bleeding, and it's not a clean state, and we keep poisoning it and wondering, why. I always wonder how come we can't think of Mother Earth as our own bodies. And we know when we put foreign chemicals in our bodies, it tries really hard to work through it. But it gets through our entire bodies, just as anything that gets put in a river is going to be put through all of our land here in North America. It doesn't just stay in one place. So it's going to be devastating to us. We're not going to have the fish, and we're not going to have the deer, we're not going to have the wildlife, and if we don't have that, then who are we without them? So it's really, really important that we continue this fight in a big way and do whatever it takes to bring our young people up to continue this as well and understand what it is that we're fighting for. So I hope that day never comes.
I'd like to acknowledge our supporters. We have built friendships throughout Ontario, not just other First Nation communities, but non-Aboriginals who understand the importance of what we're doing here. And those in Toronto and those in Waterloo who's done everything they can to support our role in our Supreme Court. They're fundraising for us. They're building knowledge. We had our first town hall meeting with the MPs last week, and they stood up for Chippewa. They know that we've taken on a role, and one of the problems that existed when we, after the NEB approved the pipeline, was we lost a number of people, but these groups have regained their attention, and now it's starting to grow again. So, after a while, we're going to have more and more people come out to our actual court date in Ottawa. So I really have to give thanks to those organizations who's taken this on out of their daily lives to support Chippewas of the Thames First Nation and do everything that's possible to support our case. It's without allies, or if we don't have allies, it's going to be a lot harder for us. But we also have to look at this in other parts of the world, or even the United States, where we have to start supporting those in North Dakota, those at Site C, those at the Rod sewage spills in Montreal, and support everything that is connected to this land. Because Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, once we get this decision made, those allies are going to be with us for other things that we need in the future. So I think without making these friendships, it's going to be hard for us, a small nation, to do what we need to do. But now that we're on a roll and we have this commitment from many Canadians, I think it's going to make our friendship and our lifestyle a lot better here in Canada. So I just wanted to acknowledge them.